What's up, watch enthusiasts? Skylar Santana here. Let's talk watches. So, Sunday morning here in New York in the afternoon, I figured I'd vlog a quick video for you guys and just talk about where my collection is headed. It's 2024 now, and I have plans, like many of you have made plans for your collection, whether it be downsizing, whether it be, looking at particular pieces that you want to add to the collection soon enough down the road this year. So first off, I want to show you guys what I'm wearing today. So this is my Omega Seamaster 300 homage watch. Big into homage watches. If you've seen any of my other videos and talked about it, just briefly, I'm really into homage watches for the simple fact that they are a motivation for me. I'm able to wear the design and DNA of some of these watches that are produced in the luxury sectors of different brands. Not ready to invest the money into those pieces. And I say invest meaning, watches, you can't really call them a solid investment because you never know whether they're going to go up and down. I mean, we've seen what's happened with watches since COVID and the market needing to correct for watches itself, but more like invest in something that I could pass down, something that's an heirloom. So for me, homage watches are a great way for me to wear that design language, really see if I like the way it feels, the way usually the size, the dimensions, the design is very close to something that you're going after. Like the Rolex Submariner was my first one that I really liked. I know it's not that exciting, Rolex Submariner, no date, or with the date is a very, very popular watch, especially with people who are just getting into watch collecting. That tends to be something that they gravitate to because it's a great watch to dress up, dress down. It's got that sporty look. And it's something that I've been interested in down the road as well. I've got a couple in my collection that I've homaged that I look to add to in the future. And when I'm wearing these watches, they're just a reminder for myself to keep working hard and make sure that I strive to get to the point where I'm able to purchase those watches down the road. It may change. I may end up changing my direction as far as what I like and what company I want to spend that money with. Grand Seiko is a great example of that, right? They even have a watch that's very close to the Rolex Submariner, except it has more of like a Gothic themed hands, which is something that I'm potentially interested in because at the end of the day, the only thing that I'm tired of is seeing the Mercedes hands. And I think that's because I look at a lot of affordable watches that are homages. Not that I have, like my whole collection's made up of them, but being a person who customized watches and seeing a lot of those homage watches to that Rolex, you just see that hands way too often. And for me, it's a little tiresome. I'd love to get something with a little bit different hands as far as that design goes. But that's something for me to develop down the road and figure out later on when I'm ready to take that plunge. But anyway, to go back to where I'm at with my collection, 2020 is when I really started collecting watches. At this point, I'm up to about, I think at the peak, I was at maybe close to 45-ish watches in total. Like if you count all the watches that I have, including a pocket watch, including some really affordable Casios or some watches that I randomly found when I started collecting, so on and so forth. And since then, going into 2024, really looking at what I have, I have 3 watch cases that fit 12 watches per. And I really wanted to get my watches down to about 31, right? Because the most days you're going to have in a month is 31 days. And for me, how I like to correlate with that is that I could wear one watch a day for the longest month and it'll be a new watch. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes I hang out with a watch for a week. Sometimes I hang out with a watch for a couple of days. And then I end up switching it out. It's just really like a feel for me. But I do also try to spread around what I'm putting on my wrist, make sure that I'm still attached to certain pieces. This way, when I get to the point where I want to move on from a watch, I could say to myself that, I'm not really connecting to this watch anymore and I don't really find it on my wrist too often. So I could probably either sell this watch or give it away. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. I'm now closer to I want to say 30 watches, somewhere around that ballpark. I've thrown some watches out. I've given some watches away. I've I haven't sold any. A lot of my watches are affordable, so I'm not going to see much of a return when it comes to that. We're talking sub 200, sub 500 indefinitely. So I found more gratification in that respect to just give my watches away to people that would appreciate it more or have more wrist time for it. So that's something that I've been looking to do as far as the new year goes for my collection. Just really downsize and appreciate the watches that I have. I know a lot of the people in the community have been saying that they're going to do their best to slow down their purchasing. And I always go back to talking about how you should really try to not add to your collection too quickly when you're in the beginning of your watch collecting. I've said it so many times, but I think it's really important to make sure that message gets to somebody who is starting their collection, because you get stuck with pieces down the road 2-3 years later, or even maybe 4 years like myself, and then you realize that those watches are no longer something that you're wearing, right? So you have to figure out, which ones am I going to give away? I bought this watch in the midst of collecting, so many so fast. When you get to like 10, 15, you don't have you can't keep up with putting the wrist time on your watches when you're adding and you have other watches coming in the mail. So you just kind of forget about some watches, or you didn't have enough time to attach yourself to a watch. So that's why we always say that it's a marathon. If you're buying a new piece, spend some time with it. Everybody calls it the honeymoon phase. That's just a nice way of saying that you're going to be very excited about a piece when you first get it. And it's not uncommon for you to get a watch, like it in the beginning, and fall off of it a couple of months later, or get a watch and not like it even when you first obtain it. Maybe it doesn't fit on your wrist like you thought it was. Maybe you didn't try it on prior. So it really speaks volumes for you to take your time and really figure out if you're really going to be attached to the watch that you're just adding to your collection, before you just go ahead and jump in and go into the next purchase and kind of go a little too crazy and end up with a lot of watches. Now, that being said, there are collectors out there that have 100 plus watches. I've seen some watchmakers in some of their collections, and some of them have 100 plus, and that works for them, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's a reason. There's something that they're happy with having that many watches. Maybe they don't put all of them on their wrist, but they like to enjoy the collection by just having them. Like, it's just something of just having a collection and having the pieces that they want, whether or not they're going to wear it. And listen, for me personally, I think that watches should be worn. I think that whatever you add to your collection, you should be able to get on wrist. And I think personally, that's the point of it. I think in my collection, there's only one watch in particular. I have like the Invicta Joker watch, just a kid side of me, something like a funky chicken that I wanted to add to the collection. And I use that watch to basically wear on Halloween. Not that it was bought just for that. I really wanted the watch, even though it looks absurd. It's like a 52 millimeter, and it's like a brick when it's on your wrist. So it's not an everyday thing that you're going to put on. But it puts a smile on my face when I look at it in the watch box. It reminds me of Heath Ledger and his Joker rendition. It brings me back to seeing that for the first time and really loving the performance of Batman when he was around. Rest in peace. So that's the reason why, I have that watch. But I personally wouldn't want 50 to 60 watches that are like that are just sitting in my watch box. That's just personally to me. I mean, you guys are spending your money on your watches. The watches are for you. So you're going to decide whether or not that is for you. And that's totally fine. So right now, basically where I'm at with my collection is, yes, I am downsizing in my collection. And I'm also taking the direction of wanting to see what it's like to own luxury watches. So the closest thing I have to that thus far is the Tissot PRX. Debatable to some people. They were talking about the parts that were utilized and how it can't be serviced, just like another luxury watch could be, so on and so forth. But for me, it fit because it was kind of like that middle ground or that beginning stage for me just to get my feet wet with a Swiss made movement, regardless of whether or not it's going to be able to be serviced. I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. For me, it was something that fit where I was, and I got a great deal on it. I actually went to an AD and I got it less than what you would purchase online for after taxes, right? So it was worth going to the AD, putting it on wrist, and really seeing if that's the direction I wanted to go. And then I also looked at some Longines because at the end of the day, those are a great way to enter into the luxury sector. If we're talking about like the Longines Conquest, a lot of people will start their luxury watches and start from there. But for me, I have my sights set on a couple of watches, but I have plenty of time before I'm going to add that to my collection. I really want to enter into that realm, tying with being able to have a moment in my life where it marks something, right? So currently trying to start a family, and if we do get pregnant, God willing, I would want to get that luxury watch at the same time that my son or daughter is born, to kind of mark that grand occasion or that big moment in my life where a memory is very attached to it. And then it's also going to be an heirloom, something to take care of and pass down to. So that also will allow me to slow down because of the cost of luxury watches. I like to personally invest my money at this point in stage of my life. um, and I think that that's going to allow me to be able to allocate more money towards that, but at the same time, just take my time, not rush into any more pieces. I mean, I've been there, I've done that, right? I tell you guys to slow down and not do it, not because I've heard it or only because I've heard it so many times, but I actually went through that. And luckily, I didn't end up with 60, 70 watches. I think at the peak, like I said, I was around 40 something. So it wasn't too bad, but I did hit that point of my life where I pretty much had a watch a month coming in or a watch every 2 months coming in. And as I started to gain knowledge about watches and more so what I'm really going to like, that has become a factor in whether or not I keep my pieces, and me realizing that, I probably should have slowed down. In hindsight, looking back, I really wish that I focused more on bringing in customized watches. While I acquired my taste, while I acquired more knowledge, it would have probably been a better bet because you take a lot more pride and joy personally, I think, when you're able to make a watch exactly how you want, the dial, the hands, the case design, whatever the case may be. And that would have been something for me to obviously say, obviously these watches are going to stay in my collection long term. I could swap out anything if I want to change up a design instead of buying a new watch. So there's a lot of pluses getting into customizing watches early on that I would recommend. The reason why, buying a do-it-yourself watch or buying the parts and buying the tools you need early on to not only gain more appreciation for the watch and what goes into actually putting one together, but then you're also you're not buying this watch for the bezel and that watch for the strap and this watch for the hands and this watch for the dial. You know what I mean? You're kind of combining all of the things that you would want in a watch early on to patch that over and not allow you to go too crazy with that. So along with bringing in luxury watches for the future, timepieces that are going to, be able to stay in my collection and stay as an heirloom and be able to pass down. I think that I also will gain that ability to slow down. I'll be able to cherish, the marking and the reason why I got the watch for the occasion. Um, and then I think that the biggest thing that my collection requires is it needs a little personality. So I say that I say that in a way where a lot of my personality is in my collection because I have a lot of customized watches. But when it comes to buying watches from manufacturers or brands, I think that when I first started off, I wasn't too confident in myself to be able to go off and buy a watch that isn't so much popular. So there's a lot of timepieces like the SKX, the Seiko Arni, the Orient Bambino, Tissot PRX, Movado Bold. I could pretty much fire off any watch in my collection right now, and most of you are going to be, very aware of what that watch is and where it came from. And that happened because of the consumption of content on YouTube and watching reviews. The time that I got into the game, these were the watches that a lot of the YouTubers were talking about, especially the SKX. When it got discontinued, it became a really big thing to shoot, and it's a really well-known watch because of the what you're getting inside the watch, versus the cost. It was a lot of value in that. Not so much today because the watch has been discontinued and the prices have hiked up. But a lot of my watches are iconic watches. A lot of my watches, Siegel 1963, so on and so forth. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I don't regret that, right? I don't regret anything, even the fact that I was bringing in watches as fast as I was, because in my personal opinion, I didn't go too crazy. I would have liked to have a slower start, but listen, you're starting off, right? Like just how I'm shooting these videos now, you're starting off, you're going to learn a lot of things, you're going to change, you're going to adapt. Your style may change, the way you dress, how you want to present yourself. There's so many factors that are going to go into your personal watch collection that's going to affect where that direction goes. And for me, I think that I would like for the brand name watches that are going into my collection to have a little more personality. Now, I say that, and I still want a Rolex sub no date. I still want a Seamaster 300. I still want an Omega Speedy. Um, there are still a lot of watches that can be identified as a common watch, a common luxury buy, something that's on everybody's wrist. But I'm still going to take the time to really assess and really see which one of those specific models, be it the Rolex Submariner. I may go with a vintage one, just so like that I get away from some of the marketing things. I may not. At the end of the day, the watches are for me, so I can care less if so many people own that watch and it's just a basic watch that everybody goes for the. I'm not worried about that. If I personally say to myself that I want to acquire pieces that are different from other people's collections, something that speaks more to what I like, which, look, I'm still developing that. 4 years later, I still don't know enough about vintage watches. I mean, there's a plethora of knowledge that you could learn. I would dare not say that I'm a watch expert at any point in time of my watch career or my collecting phase, because at the end of the day, there's just so much to know that's out there, and there's always somebody that knows a lot more than you do. But that doesn't stop me from being able to talk watches, and more in a casual aspect, and just try to connect to you guys with the content in that way. But yeah, I think that moving forward, those are going to be the factors. We're going to downsize. We're going to slow down our collection as far as what we bring in. We're going to go after more luxury pieces so we can experience that and see what that's like. And then maybe with that, we're going to try and see how much of my DNA I could put inside those selections. This way I could feel like, this is something that's in my collection that's probably not in someone else's. And it doesn't have to be the case for every single piece that I get. Maybe I want a 2024 Rolex Submariner or Speedy, or 2025 whenever I'm ready to acquire that piece. And that's totally fine, guys. Like, wherever you go with your collection, it's super encouraged, at least on my end. Like, if you have an Apple Watch, and a lot of people are going to tell you that that's not a watch. If you have a smartwatch, if you collect Invictas, those aren't real watches. There's a lot of enthusiasts that absolutely just can't stand them. I get their point of view. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I think for me as a collector, as an enthusiast, I think the main goal here is to grow the community. The main goal is to get a watch on somebody's wrist, because that may lead them towards other things, and that may get them into the rabbit hole that grows our community. So I'm all for anything that promotes something being on your wrist and giving it a chance. Another controversial thing is the Swatch watches that have came out, which I have one of those as well. Like, I want a little bit of everything. That's just how I am as a collector. Like, don't have any bias against any watch. When I obtain one at this point, I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm getting out of it. I know what the value is. As best of my knowledge, I'm still, again, acquiring knowledge to do that to the best of my ability. But I know that the Swatch, Pluto that I have is not going to be something that's going to be in my collection forever, or something that I could wear as a beater. And that's totally fine. It's a fun watch. It puts a smile on my face. It's a direct homage to the Speedy in that accord. And in some sense, that is something that's going to motivate me. And maybe it'll motivate somebody out there, hearing me talk about it. Maybe they were on the cusp of getting one, but they were a little afraid to be judged. And, am I buying something that's a fake? Homage watches, they're not fake at the end of the day. Even if it's a 1-to-1 clone on the design DNA, so long as it doesn't say Rolex, so long as it doesn't say Omega, so long as you're not trying to pass that watch off for the real thing, it is a homage watch, and it's totally fine to own one. I am against having a fake watch, to be honest with you. If I'm trying to say this watch is a Rolex and I know in good faith that it isn't, I'm not for that. I don't think that I personally want to support somebody who's just straight up copying somebody and trying to pass their watch off as it. But that being said, guys, look at some of these companies that are out there, right? Like if you go back to the Rolex Submariner, that watch has been homaged by other brands, other big brands, right? That's the most sought after design, in my opinion. And I think a lot of watch brands know this. So you could find a lot of like Hamiltons or, whatever. I'm just throwing, companies out there, but I've seen them. I've seen them in the big brands, and I've seen watches that have a lot of DNA from that Rolex Submariner. And if that were a fake, why would they be able to do that? And why don't those same people who say homage watches are totally not good stay away from those brands altogether? I mean, you just have to take it for what it is and realize that a person putting a homage watch on isn't a bad thing, because again, we're here to promote watches in general. We're here to promote growing the community, and that may just be where they're starting. It puts a smile on their face. It motivates them. It makes them happy. Whether or not they go after the real thing later, it doesn't matter. It keeps them as a collector. It keeps them in the loop, and they're going to grow from there. They're going to be happy with the duration that they own the watch, and then they'll take it from there. But those are my hot takes on my state of my collection, some of the reasons why I have what I have, and where I'm going to go for the rest of the year into 2025. I'm in no rush right now, and I'm enjoying the collection that I have. And I think that that's the biggest takeaway that we should be doing when we have a collection that's, 20 plus, 30 plus watches. I think that if you haven't spent some time with your watches and swap out bands on them, like I've taken some time out from acquiring new pieces to swap out bands on my watches. Let me see what this watch looks like in a leather band, in a NATO strap, whatever the case may be. And oftentimes that'll give that watch a brand new look. It'll breathe life into that watch, where you're excited again as you were when you first purchased it, and you're able to enjoy that watch for another couple of months without having to buy one. So there's a lot of things that you could do in order to really consolidate and to really reflect and to really give that collection your personality down the road, where you're not going to regret it. But those are my takes, guys. Thank you for joining me here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.